Hey, I'm Q Paul, and welcome to Lesson 21 in our series, Spanish for Retirees Living in Mexico. Today we're going to be talking about spatial relationships. In other words, the location of an object as it relates to the location of another object. For example, is it near, far, on top of, underneath, etc. Since we're talking about location, we're going to be using the Spanish verb estar, which means to be. Now, we've been using this one a lot in previous lessons. So by this point, you should be pretty comfortable conjugating it in the present tense. Let's start with an easy one. You may recognize this one because I've used it in previous lessons. Aquí, here. Estoy aquí, I'm here. The word for there is going to sound very similar. Allí. Linda está allí. Linda is there. Here are two new words for you. Cerca, which means near or nearby, and lejos, which means far. So if I took a sentence like, Linda está cerca, I would translate that as, Linda is close, or I could say, Linda is nearby. Just depends on context. Now let's use lejos in a sentence. Las estrellas están lejos. The stars are far, or I could translate it as, the stars are far away. By this point in the course, you've probably noticed that in Spanish, a lot of things agree in number and gender. But when it comes to cerca and lejos, they're not one of them. It doesn't matter if I'm talking about a singular object or a plural object like I am in this sentence. It'll always be lejos or cerca. Now, if you want to be more specific and say that something is close to a particular object or far from a particular object, you're going to have to add the Spanish word de. Now, when you're studying these, learn them as phrases. Don't try to break up the words. So when you think close to, you should immediately say cerca de, far from, lejos de. It's going to make it a lot easier for you down the road. Let's look at some examples. Here's our first one. The store is near the beach. La tienda está cerca de la playa. See, we just took our phrase cerca de and then plugged it in. We're never going to break those words up. Take a look at this one very carefully. It's going to be a little bit different. The beach is far from the hotel. La playa está lejos del hotel. In Spanish, anytime you have the word de followed by el, meaning the, not he, then they're going to combine to form a new word, del. It's just something to keep in mind when you're making your sentences. Here are a few more useful phrases so you can express exactly where something is in relation to something else. Now remember to memorize these as phrases. Don't break them up in individual words. Let's go through them. Encima de, on top of. Debajo de, under. Delante de, in front of. Detrás de, behind. Al lado de, beside or next to. Here's an example. La maleta está debajo de la cama. The suitcase is under the bed. Here's one more. El perro está al lado de mi silla. The dog is next to my chair. Now, when it comes to translating the English phrase in front of into Spanish, a lot of students get confused because it's not as simple as just throwing in delante de. There's a couple other options and there's subtle differences between them. You may hear enfrente de or you may hear frente a. So let's look at all these one at a time. Delante de, in front of. This one's good when something's immediately in front of something, like if the garbage can was in front of your car or somebody's in front of you in line. Then delante de is perfect. So take a look at the sample sentence. El perro está delante de la cama. Now, in my mind, that dog is right there in front of the bed, very close if not right up against the bed. So that would fit perfect. Now let's take a look at the phrase enfrente de, which is translated to mean in front of, but you have a different understanding because it can also be taken to mean across or opposite. For example, let's say I'm at the movies and I call my friend to pick me up. And on the phone I tell him, Estoy enfrente del cine, meaning I'm in front of the theater. He may think that I'm just across the street from the theater because I used enfrente de. It's really a subtle difference. Let's talk about frente a, which means in front of, but more in the sense of facing. So if I have a sentence like, Estoy frente a la puerta, I could translate that as, I'm in front of the door, or I'm facing the door. Well, that's it for today's lesson. We packed a lot of material into less than 6 minutes of video, so you might have to watch this one more than once. I encourage you to practice making your own sentences, utilizing the vocabulary words and phrases that you learned today. Hasta luego.